It's the community show on Locked On Badgers. Who is your favorite football and basketball player on this year's teams? I'm going to tell you who mine is next.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, your outlet for the best Badger content on the internet. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can get $5 bet. You get started with $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm your host, Ryan Harris, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode, we're talking about the basketball team, the key player, portal expectations, who are your favorite players on this year's football and basketball team, all that and more, because it's a community show. This is the show that we get your comments from the YouTube channel, Discord, DMs, and we just talk about them all. It's actually one of my favorite shows because we get so many different perspectives on it. And that's really what this show and this community have always been about. So let's start here. Again, all of these are comments, questions, things put on the YouTube channel and Discord. The first one from 715 Northwoods. And I love this question. Who is your favorite player on the team right now? And he didn't specify, so I don't know if he meant football or basketball. So I'm going to do both. For basketball, it's Carter Gilmore. I think, listen, he's such an easy player to root for. He's improved every year. He's taken some criticism and flack online. Instead of sulking about it or doing whatever about it, he's brushed it off and he's gotten better. Again, every single year he's gotten better. And he's gotten to the point this year where he's a reliable option on this team. He's a 6th, 7th man that you feel good about when he goes in. He's shooting a good percentage from three. He plays really hard. He's an above average passer, a good defender. I think he's easy to root for. I love seeing Gilly in there. Kamari McGee is another one that immediately sprung to mind. I like some of the younger guys as well. Nolan Winter is a player I really like, but John Blackwell as well. But to me, it's Kamari McGee or Gilmore. They're just in-state players. They care about the program. They play really hard. They're difference makers off the bench. They've gotten better. They've improved over time. They're kind of they kind of harken back to a previous era of college sports, right? That doesn't seem that's not that long ago, but it seems like a long time ago, where players would stay in a program that develop over time without a lot of fanfare, and by the time they've been in the program 2 or 3 or 4 years, they're difference makers. They're solid rotational players. So I think those two are incredibly easy to root for. On the football side, Christian Alliegro is who I'm going to go with, partially because he was from my neck of the woods that I used to live in, Connecticut. But I was also able to meet his parents at a recent game day visit. They're super nice folks. I love how hard he plays. I love the intensity he plays with. So that one is my football side. Definitely curious to you. I put it in our Discord. Curious in the chat. Who is your famous, when you watch the show, put it in the comments. Who is your favorite basketball player right now and your favorite football player right now? Okay, now we just roll through the comments. Mark Addit said, actually, I want to get to this one next. William W. says they need Sagapolu. So we've talked a lot about what is needed on this defense, and Williams nailing it. They need a guy in the middle who, whether it's a Sagapolu, whether it was a Keanu Benton, whether it was, just they need a player on the inside that can suck up double teams. They don't have a zero tech on this roster unless Jamel Howard kind of takes a step. If you're not fully sure what that is, the zero tech is the defense lineman that lines up over the center. He's the guy in the middle of the defense that really clogs things up, and you can play him as a one tech where you're moving him off to a little bit to the side. But that's one of the hardest players to get in college football, is to get a big time zero tech. That's why the best defenses tend to have one. They're hard to find. They're incredibly valuable. If you can't get that, what are the options? Well, a couple things. I think this defense is moving more to a 4-2-5, which negates the need for a zero tech a little bit. You're going to have a couple guys that are lining up off center. So Dylan Johnson could be that. Potentially a Peterson, who you just got, could be that. Those type of players can start to fill in those roles going forward in the future. Xavier Ukponu can definitely be that. Drayden Pavey can be that. But yeah, ideally Jamel Howard just takes a step. And again, I would caution people writing him off too early. He's only going to be a redshirt sophomore next year. He hasn't shown a lot yet. It would have been nice if he would have flashed more. There's a lot of players in the history of college football who don't come on until they're juniors, until they're seniors, until they're redshirt sophomores. This is a huge offseason for Jamel Howard. I'm going to keep saying it because he would be a huge addition to that defense line if he can carve out a rotation next year. Greek Freak says you need a couple more of these, a couple secondary guys, a veteran quarterback, young guys, and then transfer additions. This is the part I want to hit on from Greek Freak. Already better than this past year's team. Depending on the quarterback, I think I would agree. If they can land a solid to good quarterback, I do think you've addressed the biggest need in the room, which is the defensive line spot and the quarterback spot. If you can get a quarterback, and I like the young pieces, I do think you're setting yourself up to be a better team than you were last year. People are going to call me crazy on that. I think you are. I really think you are. You've addressed tight end, defensive line. I think most of your offensive line, your offensive line is mostly coming back, except you're going to be swapping out Nelson for Kevin Haywood, which I really like. I think the running backs are going to be better next year as Dylan Jones and Darion Dupree take a step up from their freshman to their sophomore seasons. I think the receiver room is improved. Players are going to have another year in that system. I think the offensive coordinator is better. I do think you have a better team. I think you have a better team than next year if they can hit on the quarterback, and they're going to keep adding some pieces in the portal. I do think it's better. They have to add in safety. They got to add a safety still. That's an important one, but I do agree. GT Mueller says, one step at a time, 2 very good recruiting classes, transfers to fill weak spots. And he says Santa can help get the quarterback and quarterback coach for Bucky. I wanted to put this up because a point I was making in our Discord, and if you're not part of our Discord, I welcome you to come join and talk sports with us there, talk all sorts of stuff with us there. A point I was making in our Discord is, and I brought this point up for Billy Edwards Jr., who's a quarterback that's in the portal. Left Maryland. He's probably going to Michigan, but he's solid. He's okay. He's not great. But I think he could get you to solid. And a lot of what this team needs to do is to get to solid. This team, a lot of fans want to skip from what we were last year to really good. And sometimes you just got to progress slowly. You got to take steps. And that's kind of what GT Mueller's saying. One step at a time, build the recruiting classes, keep transferring in to try to fill the weak spots. You build. I think next year's a bit of a building spot. If you can go from bad quarterback play to average to just middle tier Big Ten, that is a step towards respectability. And then the next year, hopefully you hand it off to a Carter Smith or a Mabry Metoyer, and then you take another step. I think this thing's going to be a series of steps, a series of progressions. And I don't know if I anticipate a giant leap, but as long as you can keep taking those steps forward, I think you're going to start seeing progress and start feeling optimism for this football team. Sean Mullen, we were giving up 2 yards on defense last year at the snap of the ball. Hopefully we can get that corrected. Yes, dude, this is a great comment because I don't think we talked about this a ton. We talked around it, but I don't think we really talked about it a ton. The edge guys that were brought in last year weren't fully successful, but why? A lot of the reason, not all of it, but a lot of the reason is the defense didn't do a good enough job on first and second down to put offenses in spots where our edge rushers could have a little more freedom. Now, our edge rushers still disappointed. There were still opportunities to make plays there, but I think what you're seeing this offseason and in this portal cycle is let's fix the biggest issue. That's the defensive line, because if you don't fix that, it doesn't matter what you do at linebacker. And last year, it felt like they went to fix linebacker and they didn't do enough to fix defensive line. And ultimately, fixing one before the other doesn't make sense. You got to win in the trenches. And if you don't win in the trenches, it doesn't matter which portal linebackers you add. And that's what we saw. This year, it feels like they're taking a step to fix what Sean Mullen is pointing out here. You can't give up. You can't be 2nd and 4 and then 3rd and 1 and expect your outside linebackers to get pressure, because that's just not how you generate pressure, right? Because the defense just is going to keep pushing around. Iowa threw the ball 10 times and scored 42 points. We got to fix the defensive line. We got to fix that spot. And it feels like this offseason, that's what they're doing, and that's what they're pushing towards. So I'm confident in the prioritization of positions. I think you're going to get another defense lineman that's going to be joining this class as well. And if you fix that, it makes it easier on your pass rushers. It makes it easier to find disruption. So I would agree with this. I think that was a huge issue last year, and I'm hoping that they're taking steps to correct it a little bit. Now, I will point out this, and we're going to get into this in the next topic. Let's not go overboard with what we think we've done in the portal. That's coming up next. What I've learned in the last 2 years covering the Badgers and covering the portal. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. Listen, I'm going to level with y'all. FanDuel is the easiest betting site I've ever used. And for your sports book, for your parlays, your teasers, your futures, your spreads, it is so simple. And I've used a ton of wonky ones in the past when I was trying to make a quick buck as a young Ryan. One of many get-rich-quick schemes I had. FanDuel's not like that. FanDuel is simple. It's easy. It's fast. It's clean. It's completely legit. This is where I go for all my sports betting. This is the official sportsbook of the NFL, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network for a reason. Right now with new customers, $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Please do responsibly, but the best place for all your sports bets over at FanDuel.com. All right, let's get this next comment in here because I think this is a good one. And we always try to be fair in this show. We don't just cherry pick or I don't just cherry pick comments. So this comment here from Mark Additz said, speaking to me, of course, your over caffeinated takes on portal acquisitions are part of the problem. This one sounds just like those from the last season and the ones from the season before that. Fair point. Listen, Mark, that's fair. That's super fair. I was very high on the receivers 2 years ago. I thought they would, elevate the room. Now, it turns out maybe that was more quarterback play and Phil Longo, but I was wrong. And last year, I told you, John Pius is going to lead the team in sacks. Like, I thought they solved their disruption pressure issue partially with what they brought in, right? With Cheeks and with Thomas and with Lowry and with Pius, and it didn't happen. And I think the thing I've learned from that is you can't overhaul a spot in the portal. You can't take this goes back to a point I made in the first segment. You can't take a position that's not good enough, bring in 5 new portal guys and say, done, we're good now. That's not how it works. And that's a lesson that I've had to learn. Like, I think that's a lesson learned is you augment in the portal, you don't rebuild in the portal for the most part. People disagree with that. I think that's how it works. Unless you have unlimited NIL funds or you're just incredibly lucky to some degree, you augment in the portal. I don't think you rebuild in the portal. So the point I made in segment 1 is steady progress, one step at a time. Again, can you get the defensive line from and front 7, right? Because I think it all ties together. Can you get the defense line and front 7 from what it was last year to solid? And I think these portal acquisitions get you closer to solid. And then if you get to solid and stopping the run and being a little more stout, then you can let some younger players that have a lot of bounce, have a lot of twitch, a guy like Lafayette, a guy like Heiberger, even a guy like Clayton, a guy like Post. You can get some of these younger guys in spots where they can be a little more disruptive because the defense is now in a disadvantaged situation. They're now in 3rd and 8. They're now in 2nd and 9. I think that opens up avenues for your defense, but you got to be more stout in the front 7. You have to take that step from bad to stout. And then in a couple of years, maybe you can take the step from stout to really good, and then you can build. So I think that's what you're just not going to revamp an entire room in the portal. I think that's a fair point for Mark. Realistic expectations. But the other thing I'll say is you're 12th in the transfer portal rankings right now per on 3, right? You look at some of the players that they picked up. A guy like Tanner Koziel is the 27th ranked player in the portal. So it's not just me being excited about these guys. These are legit plan A type targets too. And just because it hasn't always worked in the past, you can't stop getting good players just because of that. You keep getting good players. And they've gotten good players. They've gotten 3 plan A type guys at positions of needs. You should be excited about that. But I think we just got to have realistic expectations of that doesn't solve everything. You still have to get some younger players to step up. You have to coach it better, scheme it better, but also be excited about getting good talent because that's what they've done this year. So yeah, it's a great comment, Mark, and I totally own it, and I appreciate it. Let's go to this one here. This one is from John K. To me, the bigger question, can Tressel coach them up and be flexible and creative in his craft to put these guys in positions to succeed? That's from John K. Yeah, it's a great question. Something we've talked about a lot. Can Coach Tressel be a little more flexible with his younger pieces? I think he's going to have to. Here's the thing. You're going to get to a point with these younger pieces that you're excited about that you're either going to play them or you're going to lose them. That's the portal life. So we got lucky. I shouldn't say lucky. The Badgers were able to retain. It's not luck, right? There's an element of selling culture, vision, your NIL side coming together. The Badgers were able to retain players that they were at least could have lost. I'll say that. And I think they were able to retain them because they've sold them on roles next year to some degree, which is what you have to do. You have to get these young guys on the field, not just because of the portal area you live in, but because they give you some twitch and some bounce that you haven't had in the last couple of years. So I do think you're going to see a little more flexible defense. The other thing they've talked about is getting bigger. They've talked about the scheme is changing. I've talked to people who have talked about it. The scheme is going to change. They're going to get a little bigger. I think there's going to be more of a 4-2-5 look. That's what I've been talking about. And if you look at that front 7, what does that mean? It means a guy like Reiger is going to start kind of on one of your edges. Dylan Johnson's probably going to start on the inside. It's kind of that one tech type area. And then I think you're going to take a guy like Peterson, who could be the other starter in that middle. And then that other end spot is going to be a 6'6" guy. Maybe that's a Willer if he has a big step. Maybe that's another guy they're looking at in the portal. Maybe it's a guy, maybe, and certainly in passing situations, You're going to flip some of those guys on the inside, and you're going to have maybe a Heiberger and Lafayette on the edges. So it is going to change. The scheme is going to change. You're going to get bigger. They know that they didn't stop the run well enough this year. So I think the answer to this is a yes with a question mark, a tentative yes. I do think he'll get a little more, Tressel will get a little more flexible and creative because he's going to have to. Like, there's a lot of pressure on him. And sometimes pressure is good. Pressure can turn coal into diamonds. Of course, pressure can also, cause water to burst through a dam and destroy everything. So, like a little on each end. But I think pressure is good sometimes. Buck said Texas A&M spent $20 million on NIL last season. Unless UW can play in this arena, we will be relegated to being a mid-level team. Yeah, I mean, I would say Texas A&M spent $20 million and didn't work out. Right? Texas A&M spent $20 million a couple years ago, and a ton of those guys left, and I think they learned a lesson from it. So there's elements of, yes, spend money, you can get better players. There's also elements of Major League Baseball will show you this. There's really dumb ways you can spend money, and there's really smart ways you can spend money. Rarely has the team with the highest payroll won the World Series. Now, does it give you a better shot? Absolutely. But you got to have smart people making those decisions. And I think here's the other thing with this one. This has always kind of been the thing to some degree. College football's always been slanted to the teams with the most money. Previously, listen, I've talked to people and worked with people who have covered SEC teams. Money was always flowing in the SEC. They generally had higher coaching salaries. They had better facilities outside of a couple Big Ten teams. So some of this isn't that different. I say this multiple times, like college football is very different. College sports is very different, but the haves have generally remained the haves. And Wisconsin has never played in that very upper tier. So I don't think they need to spend at the upper tier to be good. They have to be smarter with where the money goes, and they have to do a better job at developing their talent. Okay, let's get some more comments in here. Beach Bum. Blackwell has been overhyped this year. Again, we bounce back between basketball and football on this. I just take comments take questions out of the comment section. So we get a lot of perspectives and a lot of thoughts in these shows, which I really love. So I'm going to close something on my computer that keeps popping up. Blackwell has been overhyped this year. I don't think he's played up to the expectations we've had. So I think in that sense, Beach Bum, I would agree with you. I think there's an element. I mentioned this in the last show. I believe it was a show, either last show or 2 shows ago, doing a reaction. I think him and Tanjay have similar roles, and I think it's causing a little bit of an issue where I believe Blackwell is deferring a little bit to Tanjay. Defenses are more focused on Blackwell this year. He's a higher priority in the scouting report. Last year, he was a freshman, and you had a Chucky Hepburn, you had an AJ Storr, you had a Tyler Wall. So Blackwell got more open looks. He had more room to breathe. He shot the ball better. He's not shooting it quite as well this year, and I think he's adjusting to having more defensive pressure on him. Defensively, I think he needs to be more consistent. Outside of that, though, I do think he's been okay. I think he's been solid. I would give him like a B grade. I don't think he's been quite as good as we had hoped, but I think he's still, to me, pretty clearly been the second best player on this team. Let me think about that. Yeah, I think second best player on this team. Philip B. That Arizona win, Arizona's now 4-5. That win gets weaker and weaker by the week. Yep. 100%. We took a lot of stock out of that win when it happened. We said, hey, quad 1 win. Is they a really athletic team? They got scores in the backcourt. Oh, boy. That team is nosediving. By the way, y'all remember the Locked On Wildcats host who said Tanjay would not start for the Wildcats? Yeah, bro. Like, you could use a couple Tanjays. Maybe you wouldn't be 4-5. I'll say that. James H. Crowl only had a good game because Butler is small. We will see what happens when Crowl faces Iowa. I think Crowl had a good game because Crowl was engaged. We've seen Crowl have good games against other bigs. Like, the notion that Crowl can only have a good, and James, I'm not trying to it definitely helps when there's not a super physical big. Make no mistake. But Crowell's had good games against other bigs. He struggles more against really physical ones. But I think Crowl had a good game because Crowl wanted to have a good game. I think it's that simple. Crowell's got an aggression slider. If all y'all play video games, you can adjust sliders, right? Like aggression level, speed, quickness. Like Crowell's aggression slider has to be turned up. He's got to turn it up. And if he does that, he's going to give you a good game. He's going to give you a solid game. It's not always going to be a great game, but there's no reason Steven Crowl can't go out there and give you 6 and 8 every night. There's just no reason. 6 and 6 every night with a couple assists. There's no reason he can't do that. I think when he decides he wants to have a solid game, he has a solid game. And I think it's almost as simple as that. And it sounds like when Guard talks about it, he thinks the same. Okay, we're going to take a quick second here. I'm going to go back on the basketball team for the next comment. Who is the key to this team? And I'm going to tell you why it's Steven Crowl, but I'm going to have some stats behind it. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers, plus a bunch more of your comments, including offensive coordinator questions. Do we need to play Mabry Mettoyer? Why we can't get 2 quarterbacks this cycle? A bunch more of your comments coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show, new friends of the show over at, because listen, we know what time it is. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you the hardest hitting, highest flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Okay, let's talk about Steven Crowl. And we got a comment up here from Philip B. This is so true, man. As Crowl goes, so go the Badgers. So, yes, here's the thing. The Badgers last year on a team that was 22-14, they were 4-5 when Crowl scored less than 7 points. That team was a 22-14 team. That's a really solid record. They're under 500 when Crowl doesn't score 7 points. This year, they're 9-1 when he scores at least 6 points. They have one loss when he scores at least 6 points. So it's all on, it's not all on Crowl, but when Crowl is engaged, it does two things. Okay. The first is it relieves pressure on the perimeter players because for the most part, Crowell's getting those points at the rim. He bangs the occasional three. I get it. It's not a huge part of his diet. It's like me. My diet is junk food, chips, Tostitos, nachos, and IPAs. A small part of my diet is Caesar salads. That's like Crowell shooting threes. The bulk of his diet's at the rim. So when he's scoring buckets, it's giving you a rim presence, which does two things. It sucks the defense in. It makes them either double or at least suck in a little bit, which opens up perimeter shots. It opens up your shooters a little bit. But the other thing it does when Crowell's engaged is you activate the passing ability because now players can cut off him. And if he's engaged, he's looking to score. That gets defenses' heads turned. That's how it works. Players aren't robots. They get sucked into the tension. So they turn, they see it, players cut. It opens so much up just when he's engaged. Yeah, as Crowl goes, so go the Badgers. I agree, Philip, 100%. All right, some more comments here. This is in regarding a comment from Brian Smith, who said the Badgers need to sign more receivers. Running with Jason says we have never signed upper echelon receivers on a regular basis. I would agree with that, but we have signed numbers. And I really like the 24 class. I've talked about it. I really like the 25 class. I've talked about it. You got to sign more than one combined or two receivers between those two classes. You have to. You have to. And it's not always about signing upper echelon receivers. It's about getting some bodies in that room for two reasons. The first is it's easier to retain talent when you have it. So you want to keep feeding the pipeline. It's the same reason I didn't love getting a running back this cycle. I know you have Darion Dupree. I know you have Dylan Jones. I know you have Gideon Atuka. I still think you got to find a running back and a couple receivers every cycle because you want to keep that pipeline running. You want to keep talent in the program. So you got to keep reloading it. You got to get more than one or two receivers especially over the course of two cycles. If you got one last year, you got to get three this year. If you got three last year, then you can get one this year. You got to probably average two a cycle. Next year is a big year. The 26 class for running backs and receivers, they got to hit on both because the last couple cycles, they haven't done enough. This one's from C. Fiss, which I think was Craig Fissel. I had to cut it off because I was running into a character limit there. He says Tretch and Steck will be used in the flat and underneath routes. Grimes' bread and butter complement in the run game. And there will be a boundary receiver complement to Anthony coming from the portal. So I would take, this is a great comment, but I would take Steck's name out of this. I think Craig made this comment before our new tight end committed, whose name just left my brain for a second, Tanner Koziel. Like Tretch and Tanner Koziel are going to kill in the flat and underneath routes. That's absolutely what Grimes wants to do. He's going to use motion, and then he's going to use a guy like Tretch and Koziel kind of in the flat, underneath routes. He runs a lot of mesh, which is the routes coming between each other, across each other to confuse defenses. You get some kind of natural rub route action with those. Those guys are going to be really good with that. And I do think in a year, Steck is a guy who's going to continue to develop into that role as well. Boundary receiver to complement Anthony. That's interesting to me because what they need is a big physical guy. And because Anthony is a very good receiver, they need a guy who can line up on the line of scrimmage and be physical against press coverage. That could be a Quincy Burrows next year. It could be a CJ Williams next year. I think in a couple years, it could be a Eugene Hilton Jr., but it's not going to be this year. So I don't know what they're going to do on that opposite side of Vinny. I think Vinny's absolutely going to play a ton, but he's not ideal at that role of getting off press coverages. And we saw that some last year. This is from 75 Shady Storm. Stop focusing on the quarterback, Ryan. He didn't say Ryan, but that's That's how I picture him talking to me now. Stop focusing on the quarterback, Ryan. Fix the O-line and running game. Throw 20 times a game. 10 play action, 5 short, and 5 screens. Run 30 or 40 times a game. I don't think so. I get the point of this. Like, Wisconsin has been very successful in the past running the ball and not really focusing on the quarterback. But we've also seen that really limit the ceiling. It's almost like saying when you're going to the racing track, like, don't focus on that one part that could help your car because we can make it all cobbled together with these other pieces. You got to get a quarterback. I think in this modern era of football, defenses are too good at taking away the run. And we've seen it. The good teams we play, if you don't have a difference maker at quarterback, unless you have a Melvin Gordon and multiple offensive linemen on the multiple NFL offensive linemen, you're just not going to succeed without the quarterback. So while I understand the premise of this and that Badgers do need to get back to their roots, they do need to run the ball better. I 100% agree. You got to get a quarterback, man. You just got to. Let's go here next. CS, I vividly remember hearing Ryan and Justin on a podcast saying that if Tanner Mordecai hits, there's a chance he could be our best quarterback since Russell Wilson. So this was a comment from Cold Stone, and he was basically saying, stop comparing every quarterback to Russell Wilson. Stop saying every quarterback could be the best thing since Russell Wilson. I was talking about Fernando Mendoza, potential portal target. And I think this point here is still right. Like, the Badgers have had such a low bar at quarterback. Nobody's saying these quarterbacks will be better than Russell Wilson. That's crazy. But who have they had since Russell Wilson that's been a great quarterback? They've had Scott Tolzien and Jack Cohn. And those are both good quarterbacks. They were Bs. I think if the Badgers hit in the portal, they can get somebody better than those guys. That's got to be the goal, right? Those are just solid college quarterbacks. I just don't think it's crazy to think you could get a quarterback better than a Jack Cohn. I think that should be the goal. Now, if you also get a Jack Cohn, that's fine because you can win with a Jack Cohn. The Badgers have done it. Notre Dame did it. Like, that's fine. But I think it speaks more to how bad Wisconsin's been at quarterback than anything else. This one's from Allen. Eventually, you have to start playing the young quarterbacks, see what they have, at least at the backup position. Yeah, maybe Matt Toyer, Carter Smith. I think here's the thing. I think the goal is you have one more bridge. I think that's all 100% the goal. One more bridge because you don't want Carter Smith playing as a true freshman. You just don't. And I'm not sure if Mabry's ready. And even if you think he is, you can't go into next year with no experience. You just can't. So I think what you do is you get one more year. Portal guy, bridge guy, maybe it's a Billy Edwards, maybe it's a Preston Stone, maybe it's a Daniel Neal, maybe we talked about all these guys, right? Maybe it's a Prigula from Penn State, Bo Prigula, who just entered the portal. It could be any of these guys. My point is, I think you need one more bridge, and it's not ideal. It's not perfect. You don't want to use bridge quarterbacks, but the room is too young. It's just too young, and it would be borderline malfeasance to go into next year without adding another veteran arm. So yes, I agree. You got to play the young guys. Playing the young guys is not this year, though. Not with this schedule, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Ronjo says, you were so high on Metoyer when we got him. What happened? It's like he had been written off and you moved on. So I want to be super clear. I've not moved on from Metoyer at all. At all. I just think you got to keep adding talent. That's all it is. And I want Metoyer to compete. I think this is a big offseason for him. He has a connection with the new offensive coordinator, Grimes, who recruited him out of high school. So I am not against this at all. At all. I'm not written them off. I think it's crazy how quickly fans do write these guys off. I think the portal era has sped up expectations for fans. Mabry's still going to be a redshirt freshman next year. That's way too early to give up on a guy with his skill set, his size, his arm. I do think Carter Smith maybe fits the offense better going forward that Grimes wants to run, but I'm all about Mabry. I'm all about all of them competing. Let the cream rise to the crop, or let the cream rise to the top. I'm not written any of these guys off, not whatsoever. Some more questions here from Todd Go. Said, what about Dylan Johnson? I think this is actually from Todd Great Outdoors. What about Dylan Johnson? This guy should be able to stand up offensive lineman. He was a stud on the wrestling mat. I think so. I think he's a guy, though, that's still always going to be a little undersized if you want him to consistently hold up against double teams in the middle. I think he needs to be part of rotation. There's disruption there with Dylan Johnson. He's not a traditional zero tech, 325 pounds that's going to carry a ton of girth. He's more of a penetrating defensive lineman that can definitely stack. He can definitely stack and shed against the running game, but I don't think you want him for the course of an entire game holding up against double teams. I think he will get worn down at his size. He will play with great leverage, great energy. I like him a lot. He's an older freshman. He came in at 20 years old, so he's a little more physically developed than traditional freshmen would be. So coming into next year, he's going to be like a 21-year-old defensive lineman that plays. I like him a lot. I think he's more of a 3-tech, and a 3-tech is not the type of guy who's going to consistently hold up against offensive linemen, but I think he can be a really good 3-tech. I think he can be I think he can play a 1-tech too. I think he can play more on the inside than that as well. Okay, any other comments here? We got more, but we're not going to be able to get into all of them. Rebel Within, we'll end on this one. Good pickup on Rager. Coming off a knee injury has me hesitant, though. Here's the thing. Buyer beware on all portal additions, right? Whether it's coming from a lower level, whether it's a potential culture thing, whether he has injury history, whether he's just in it for the bag. Just about everybody in the portal, you're buying at the used car lot. You are buying, and there's nicer used cars lots. And then there's a little grittier used car lots that I shopped at as a younger person because I didn't have a huge bag. So, like, you can get higher degrees of certainty in the portal, but everybody you're getting in the portal feels like it comes with some risk. So, Rebel Within, you are correct. Reiger had a bad knee injury, missed all of last year. It's certainly a risk. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be a really nice piece on the defensive line. But yeah, when you get guys in the portal, much like when you get high school kids, like there's no certainty in any of it. It's recruiting, and that's why you have to get numbers. That's why you have to stack talent, and then you have to develop that talent. So it's a good point, though. Thank you all so much. I love these community shows. Keep sending in questions, DM me, put them in the comment section. I really do enjoy these. On Wisconsin, when you're done here, go check out Locked On College for all the latest stories across the college football landscape with playoffs coming up, NIL, transfer portal. It's all there. Locked On College Football on Wisconsin. Appreciate the heck out of all of you.